On today's show, Paul Rulkens, the business consultant of choice for KPMG, ExxonMobil, McKinsey, Uber, Canon, and other top companies, explains why 97% of people are wrong about almost everything all the time. And he explains the action steps that you need to take to be correct all the time, to be in that top 3% of people that are actually correct. All this and more on today's edition of the Thrive Time Show on your radio and podcast download.
Get ready to enter the Thrive Time Show.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom and we'll show you how to get here. We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom, now we here.
We started from the bottom, now we're on the top. Teaching you the systems to get what we got. Colton Dixon's on the hooks, I break down the books. Z's bringing some wisdom and the good looks. As the father of five, that's why I'm alive. So if you see my wife and kids, please tell them hi. It's the C&Z up on your radio. And now 3, 2, 1, here we go.
We started from the bottom, now we here. We started from the bottom and we'll show you how to get here.
Yes, 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 and yes. Thrive Nation, I could not be more excited about today's show and today's guest because this man actually believes that in many cases, 97% of people are wrong about almost everything. Paul, welcome on to the Thrive Time Show. How are you, sir?
It's great to be here.
Paul, I watched many of your presentations on YouTube that I could find, and I was just blown away with your overall worldview. Can we start with the question here? Can we start with this? Why do you believe that 97% of people are wrong about almost everything?
The thing is, what you see is that the vast majority of people, and I call this 97%, they go through life on autopilot. In other words, they tend to do the same things over and over again. And they get the same results. If you do the same things, you get the same results. Now, there's only a small percentage, like the 3%, and I'm calling this the 3%, the high-performance percent. They decide to do things differently. And that's why I say that 3%, they make the world go round and make the changes you need, especially when it comes to innovation.
Okay, so let's make it really topical for a second. Just yesterday, the Telegraph reported that Neil Ferguson's Imperial model could be the most devastating software mistake of all time. Fox News said the same thing. It's mainstream media at this point. But Neil Ferguson initially predicted that 2.2 million people could die from the COVID-19. And now the numbers are being adjusted, and now you're seeing that Dr. Deborah Birx in America said that maybe 88,000 people could die, and then she came out and said that she can't trust the numbers at all. How is it possible that the whole world was scared by a model that no one seems to have analyzed or even looked at?
That's the problem with models. Models is a simplified representation of reality. And we sometimes confuse reality with models itself, and then we start to believe models instead of reality. And it's a mistake that's made often also in history, where we trust the calculations, trust the mathematics, because they look good. But in reality, we need to be much more critical about the assumptions behind all of this. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, once you see that the data doesn't fit the model, what is it that you do? Do you change your model, or do you continue to focus on what you thought initially? And I think those are the two pitfalls of relying too heavily on models.
Why do people double down when they're wrong? I know back in the day when I bought advertisements there, Paul, when I was a young entrepreneur, I went on to build America's largest, or one of the largest, disc jockey entertainment companies in America. But when I first started out, I bought an ad in a magazine, Paul, and this ad never generated results. But because I had spent so much money on it, I kept spending money on it. Could you explain what caused me to be a jackass for so long until I learned to think more like you?
Well, usually it comes from a good place. And the reason is that people tend to fall in love with their product instead of falling in love with the result. And once you fall in love with the product, it's very difficult to make changes because it feels like changing your baby. And it is very difficult for people to do that. And changing mid-course is some of the most difficult things for entrepreneurs to do.
Where did you come from? Based on your accent, it sounds like you're from Coweta, Oklahoma. Where are you from, sir?
I'm from the Netherlands. So in Europe, Small country, Europe, but that's where I grew up.
I want to talk like you. If I talked like you, I would rule the world. You sound much. you are much smarter than I am, but then you sound much smarter too, and it doesn't make it fair. Is there a pro tip you want to give me on how to sound like you?
Well, if you move to the Netherlands and work here for a couple of years, then probably you adopt the same accent. So who knows?
Can you? So the Netherlands. Explain to people geographically where that is located in comparison to, let's say, Britain.
Yeah, if you look at the Netherlands, it's a small country. It's in between Germany and Britain. So we have Germany, then we have the ocean, then we have the Netherlands, and then we are as a kind of sandwich in between those two big countries. So it's very small. It's 70 million inhabitants. Not too big, but we tend to the Dutch tend to be a very entrepreneurial people. So when I talk and work with entrepreneurs, it's something I find in the Netherlands, and I enjoy that.
So let's talk about this for a second. Now, your background is very impressive, and I you certainly don't have to justify your background to earn my respect because I've looked into it. But can you share with the listeners about your career, just so people know that you aren't crazy as we continue through this interview?
Yeah, right. Here's the background. I grew up in the Netherlands. In a family. My father was a professor of chemical engineering. My mother was a teacher. So I grew up loving information, loving knowledge, trying to understand the method to the madness. And then I studied chemical engineering. So I did that for a couple of years. I became a scientist. And then I wanted to become a corporate executive. So I worked for 15 years or so in corporations all over the world, doing what engineers love to do, which is solving problems which do not talk back. That's typically what we do. But after a certain point in time, I realized that what has got me here will no longer get me there. And then I became fascinated by something else, which is what is it that most successful people, teams, and organizations do differently if they want to go from A to B in the easiest way possible. And that's where I found my passion for high performance. So right now I'm a professional speaker, but also a trusted advisor, helping people, teams, organizations to get from where they are to where they want to be.
And what is your educational background? Can you kind of break down that? Where did you go to school, or what kind of influenced your thinking?
Well, I went to school in the Netherlands, so it's the Dutch school system. It was the high school is a very broad school, so I learned various subjects, variation of. I also learned languages and history, but then you specialize. So when I was about 20 years old or so, I specialized in chemical engineering, and that's an education which provides solving problems, solution thinking, design thinking, which I benefit from right now. So that has really shaped my world. I got a broad perspective, but also got a narrow field where I can apply ideas from this field into what I'm doing right now.
So what is the purpose of thinking in your mind? If you because the listeners out there maybe haven't heard some of your talks, and I have, but I would like to ask you the question. From your perspective, what is the purpose of thinking?
It depends on who do you ask. If you ask this question to a philosopher, the philosopher will have 1,000 answers: goal achieving, survival, etc., etc., etc. But if you ask that question, what's the purpose of thinking, to a brain scientist, she will tell you that the purpose of thinking is to stop thinking. And what she means by that is that thinking is a high energy activity. So whenever we think, we try to think as short as possible, and then we return to automatic pilot. And what seems to happen is that over 95% of our lives we simply spend on automatic pilot. And that's not helpful if we want to overcome myopic thinking, if we want to innovate and think differently. So that's why it is so important to understand the way we think and how we can break through this pattern.
Stanford came out with a report that said there was something like 55 to 85 times more people that had COVID-19 than what we knew about, which to me, as a person who likes to think, that's a good thing. I go, wow. So if 55 times more people have had COVID than what we thought about, than what we thought, then that means then the virus is less dangerous than we thought. I mean, if 55 times more people have it, that means that it's less dangerous. But a lot of people that don't like to think go, oh my gosh, it's more dangerous. Can you please explain what do people do when they're not thinking? I don't even understand not thinking. Help me understand how people can go around not thinking. How is this possible?
Thinking itself is a difficult activity. We tend to go to routines, to habits. So we do things the way we've always done this. And habits are triggered. There are triggers which help us doing those habits or applying those habits. So if we do not consciously challenge those triggers, we tend to think always in the same way. And the bridge to high performance, the bridge to expertise, the bridge to innovation is to be aware of the triggers and then build different routines which will force you to think. I'll give you an example. One of my routines to think is a concept called deep thinking. And every day I sit down with pen and paper without any distraction, and I think for half an hour. Just think for half an hour. And this is enormously helpful. So these type of routines will help you to break through the pattern of unconscious habits.
Yes. Thrive Nation, somebody replay that, write that down, do that. That is so critical. We call it meta time on the Thrive Time shows, where you take time out of your schedule every day to think above, and the word meta means above, to think above the daily distractions and all the reactions and all the obligations and all the unnecessary conversations, and think about your goals for your faith, your family, your finances, your fitness, your friendship, and your fun. I mean, you got to think about these things. I mean, I want to wake people up. Help us, Paul. Help us wake people up. What do the people need to do to wake up if they've just been drifting around being mentally lazy for a decade?
Well, there are a couple of steps. First step is you make a decision. As of today, I am going to do it differently. And once you make a decision, then ask yourself, which type of routines do I have to build? And if you make a decision, these are the routines I need to build, for instance, deep thinking, then start working on deep thinking and hang on to a routine for about 21 days. And all of a sudden, this routine or this habit is yours. So it can be that simple. What you need to realize is you will never get the new results that you want from the existing behaviors that you like. You'll never get the new results that you want from the existing behaviors that you like. So if you start to change your behaviors, you get new results. And this is the key to changing your life.
I talked to a lady yesterday who is a health care worker who works in a nursing home. And she was telling me the guidelines that have been given to her for how to treat people during COVID-19 don't make logical sense. I talked to a physician's assistant in Colorado who told me that anytime that somebody has a flu-like symptom over the phone here, Paul, we haven't diagnosed somebody in person. I'm saying if somebody calls in with any cough or flu-like symptom over the phone, they're supposed to chalk them up as being COVID-19. And she says this makes zero sense. Senator Jensen from Minnesota, Dr. Senator Jensen, said in his entire career, he's never been coached on how he's supposed to diagnose a patient. And he says you're supposed to put COVID-19 on anybody's chart who has any cough or flu-like symptoms. These industry standards can be so dangerous when it comes to thinking, because once people accept an industry standard, even if it doesn't make sense, people go with it. Talk to me about the dangers of industry standards.
Here's the danger of industry standards. The danger of industry standards is, well, what is an industry standard? This is the way we do it in our profession or in our industry because everyone else is doing it. Now, the danger is that you start to outsource your thinking to a standard. And the problem is that if the situation changes, the environment changes, the profession changes, the industry changes, you continue to operate in the same way. And at a certain point in time, you hit a wall. So the big danger is that you're no longer willing to innovate, but you simply outsource your thinking to a standard. And this is the fastest way to go bankrupt and or lose your job or destroy your career. So the big danger here is to not consciously think about how things are being done and if there's a better way of doing things.
Elon Musk talked about how he tweeted this. He said, fear is the mind killer. Fear is the mind killer. I find that a lot of people are controlled by fear. could you please explain how fear could be used to manipulate 97% of people if people aren't if people don't know the facts in any scenario? I mean, how can fear be used to control people that aren't used to thinking deeply?
I think there's an internal fear and external fear. Let me talk about the internal fear. The internal fear has something to do with your own self-awareness, and people are very very sensitive to their own self-awareness. And what happens is that often what you see even with smart people, they suffer from what we call the Dunning-Kruger effect. And what's the Dunning-Kruger effect? The less we know about the subject, the more we think we know about the subject. So if we know nothing about something, we think we are expert at something. And it's very hard also for very smart people to acknowledge that if you're smart in many areas, there are many more areas you're not very good at. So that's the internal, that's the fear. You have to overcome the internal fear. Here's the external fear. The external fear is that it's very difficult for us to distinguish between noise and signal. And we live in a world with a lot of noise, and we contribute, or we think that noise is as important as signal, the real important data. And because we are not aware of that, we tend to miss the forest while only looking at the trees. So that's the second part of fear.
Fear is really, really a dangerous thing. If you don't understand that fear can be used as a manipulation strategy, think about this for a second. If you're out there listening today, and let's say that you are going to go buy a dishwasher today or a refrigerator, and the salesman says, well, we only have one left. Paul, why does that strategy work, that estimation of loss, that strategy of if you don't buy this, we have no more dishwashers left? Why is that strategy so effective?
Yeah, the strategy is very effective, and the reason is very simple. We are very risk-averse and loss-averse. In other words, we work much harder to prevent losing something we already have than trying to get something new. And this is human nature. Human nature is loss-averse. The trick to overcome this is to ask yourself, what's the worst thing that could happen? In the case of the dishwasher example, if we don't have it in stock, what's the worst case that can happen? Well, I'll buy it somewhere else. So once you ask that question, you simply take out the power of fear, the fear that you have yourself, and the fear that is driven by others.
Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The object of life is not to be on the side of the majority, but to escape finding oneself in the ranks of the insane." Can you explain what that quote means, sir?
What it means is that if you look at life, it's important to avoid herd behavior. It's important to think for yourself and avoid peer pressure to do what everyone else is doing. Which matters because if it boils down, philosophically speaking, the size of your funeral will be determined by the weather. So the size of the funeral will be determined by the weather. It will not be determined by the rest. In other words, what is important for you in life is to think for yourself and not to follow the herd. And this connects to what we talked about earlier. For this, it's important to think and learn how to think and draw your own conclusions and then test those conclusions in the real world. And this is the fast way of getting to a high performance. So the quote of Marcus Aurelius, which is over 1,500 years old, is very accurate because, after all, we are human beings. And the things we are facing right now, the Romans were facing 1,500 years or 2,000 years ago as well.
I want to get your take on this. The majority of people, I believe the majority of people, are entirely wrong about high performance. Do you agree with that? And what's your take on that?
What they are wrong about high performance, and the reason that they are wrong about high performance is that if they are right about high performance, they all would be high performance. Yet high performance, the way I define this, is only a limited amount of people, limited amount of organizations, limited amount of groups. Now, the thing is, the reason that they are wrong is not because they don't have the skills or the talents or the intelligence, but they are unaware of what it takes to go to high performance. And once you start to become aware, start to think differently, understand how your automatic thinking operates, how to break through the patterns that you have, once you start aware and make a decision to change this, this is the way to move to high performance. So there is a method to the madness, to high performance, and it's not something you're born with or comes to you. It's something you can work on very deliberately.
If I want to work on it deliberately, what's the best way to do it? Do you have a book that teaches this? Is there a course you have online? If I want to awaken my mind, what's the best way? What kind of tools do you have for me?
Yeah, there are a couple of things you can do. The first one is get information, knowledge. I wrote 2 books. You can read the books. There are some practical examples of how to do it, habits you can build to take the next step. But information, knowledge is very important. Then the second thing is decide to take action on the knowledge, and build the routines. And we were talking about deep thinking, but another routine which I use on a regular basis, especially when you want to be an unstoppable goal achiever. It's a great routine. It's every morning I write down the 10 most important goals which I want to achieve half a year to a year from now. And I do this every morning, top of my head, and every day I write down the same goals. What is going to happen is once you start this habit, all of a sudden you become massively goal-oriented.
Yep.
And this is the way to break through standard thinking. And this is a way to unleash the creative juices to make it happen. So that's the second step, clarity. And the third step is then take massive action. Once you got a goal, what is it that you can do immediately, right now, to make a next step, And if you have made enough next steps, then all of a sudden your goal is there.
You are just a wealth of knowledge. So I want to get your take on this. The New York Post recently came out with an article that explained, and I'm a big fan of history, and I always tell people when you know history, the future's not a scary, nebulous mystery, because history often repeats itself. And the New York Post put out an article that was shocking for many, many people. But the article said here that the influenza pandemic fueled the rise of the Nazi Party, and that what we now call concentration camps were once called quarantine camps, and that the tracers, their job was to round up people with dissenting worldviews and take them to these quarantine camps. Sir, do you think that most people are aware of history and how Hitler took power?
The thing with history is if you're not aware of history, you tend to repeat it. So that's one thing. My advice is always to be aware of history and see what type of things you can learn from history, but also help you think for yourself and discuss and see what works and what doesn't work. Never outsource your thinking to someone else.
Never outsource your thinking to somebody else. I see a lot of business owners that say, okay, you want me to build a workflow for my business? Because I do consulting with business owners, big businesses, small business owners, and I'll work with them to build a workflow. So like shawhomes.com, I've worked with them now for 4 years. We've grown the company from 24 million to now over 80 million in sales, on pace to do 100 million in sales. And they're great because when I tell them homework to do, I say, hey, we need to have you this week work on a script for your call center. Aaron Antis, who is the marketing director, says, great, I'll work on the script, and he does it himself. But people that are not successful will delegate the writing of the script to a member of their team who is bad at sales. It's like they outsource the thinking. They say they go to their poor performing sales rep and they say, sales rep, why don't you do the thinking for me? You write the script for me. Why do people tend to do that?
The reason that people tend to, a couple of reasons. First of all, they don't have confidence in their own strength and skill and expertise. The second reason is that they think there are more important things to do in a business. Now, two perspectives here. First of all, if you look at the business, the most important part of your business is marketing, innovation, and strategy. So writing a script, taking that example, is part of marketing, is one of the most important things you can do, and do it well. It will have a significant impact on your business. So you can never outsource these type of tasks. The first thing, it's about expertise, skill. And the interesting thing is that if you want to grow as a business, as a professional, the trick is to build on strength. Understand your strength, acknowledge your strength, and build on strength. Because it's much easier to become 10 times stronger at the things you're already good at than trying to improve a couple of percent at the things you're already bad at. So identify your strength, connect it to your business. How do you run your business? And then make sure that you do the critical tasks yourself, or make sure that you have experts or professionals who can do those critical tasks, but do oversee those tasks. Never delegate and never come back. And that's a bad idea also for business owners.
What time do you typically wake up, sir?
I typically wake up at 5:30.
And how do you organize the first 4 hours of every day?
Yeah, the first 4 hours. There is an internal organization, external organization. External organization is about preparing the kids, going to school. So that's the external part. The internal part are the things that I do to prepare myself for the day. And typically in the first 4 hours, there are a couple of things I do. The first one is I spend time, 20-25 minutes, reading, getting new information, uplifting information. That helps me. The second thing which I do, I already mentioned that, it's a 10-goal exercise, a routine I build every single day. Then the other thing I do is I eat my frog. Every single day I eat my frog, which is of course a metaphor, and the metaphor is to do the thing or start a day with the thing which I fear most. Because it's the thing that you fear most which will obviously and most of the time help you to take the next step when it comes to achieving big goals. So I eat my frog. So that's a thing I do. And then the final thing I do, apart from deep thinking, the final thing I do in the morning is I look at what I wrote down the day before. And every day I end my working day with, these are the 3 outcomes I want to achieve the next day. And my habit is that I will not finalize a day unless I have achieved those 3 outcomes. So with this routine, it helped me to be enormously productive, even especially in the first 4 or 5 hours of the day.
I think there's somebody out there who can relate to me, and they're saying, I really, really don't like doing X. And so they put it off. In my case, I really don't like reading legal documents or documents in general, but I make myself do it every day. And the first thing in the morning, like you're saying, I make myself do it. I hate reading litigious documents. I don't like it. So I do it first. Help somebody out there that has bought into the lie that they should do it last. Yeah.
If you do it last, it will not be done. And if you're lucky, it will be done in a very bad way. So doing it last is not a good idea. It's the same with meetings. If you have a meeting with someone or a team, then the difficult subject, put it first, because that's what this meeting is all about. Now, the trick is how to fall in love with doing the difficult tasks. First of all, you can build a routine. The second thing is you can try to make it playful. And playful might mean, in this case, legal documents, is what is it I can do with legal documents that puts a smile on my face, Yeah, and once you have that mindset, all of a sudden you become very creative, and you want to do this task because you want to have this smile on your face. So try to bring a bit more creativity, try to bring a bit more fun in the things that you hate doing most.
I crank up music while I'm doing my paperwork, not music with lyrics, but instrumental stuff like epic orchestral music, like the Braveheart soundtrack or the Last Samurai, or something by Hans Zimmer. Do you listen to music while you're doing your deep thinking?
Yeah, absolutely. My favorite music is Baroque music. It's a way I engage my brain. And it helps me to focus. So I can do the deep thinking with this type of music, but I've got other music which will help me to do stuff during the day. So music is one of the ways I help myself put myself in the mood of being highly productive.
How does Baroque? What does Baroque music sound like? Is that what does that sound like?
Baroque music is melodious. It's often quite simple. It's simple music. It's not highly complicated, so it's not a Beethoven-like music. It's classical music from the 17th, 18th century, and it puts your brainwave in an alpha state. They call it an alpha state, which helps at least me thinking very deeply. So you should try it. It's very nice.
How do you spell that, sir?
Baroque, Baroque.
Sir, I want to respect your time, but I want to take all of your time. So I have 2 final questions for you. And then Jason Beasley, my co-host, has a question for you. Is there a specific book that you have written that you would recommend, or a book that someone else has written that you would recommend?
If you want to know more about high performance, so how can you get everything you can out of everything you've got? A good book is my book, Power of Preeminence, The Power of Preeminence. I wrote this a couple of years ago. Very practical tools to immediately build habits for high performance. So that's a very practical book. Other authors which have written very good books to know more about this type of subject. I'm a big fan of Brian Tracy. Very accessible, his material. I'm also a fan, if you talk about business, I'm also a fan of Dan Kennedy, of Jay Abraham. All those books are very good. And if you want to know more about thinking, how we think, have a more grounded idea of how to take the next step, then books by Daniel Kahneman, Nassim Taleb, and Alan Weiss. These are great books which will help you to take the next step in your thinking.
Okay, Jason Beasley, you can ask Paul any question you want. Now, mind you, this is one of my favorite guests I've ever had. A lot of pressure on you. Not too much pressure, but there's a lot of pressure. And
Well,
if you ask the wrong question, it could take this interview to the bottom.
Gotcha.
And so far, this has been one of the best interviews.
This has been amazing.
There's about a half million people listening now.
Yeah.
So you could take the show to a real bad place here, sir. So no pressure, but go for it, my friend.
So, Paul, you had mentioned before when Clay asked about why 97% of people are wrong all the time, and he used the Neil Ferguson model as an example, and what you said completely shook me to the core about how projections are just projections. It's not factual. It's an over-exaggeration of what the cause is. I'm a huge fan of science. It was my favorite subject in school, so I'm a big fan of the scientific method, but also the Socratic method. So where have you seen in your work with, other people, entrepreneurs, where have you seen that line gets blurred between the Socratic method, the scientific method, basically asking questions in order to get to the root solution, whereas most people just go in blindly?
Yeah. It's behavior I often see in corporations. I am working a lot with corporations, have been working a lot in corporations, and typically in strategic sessions, what you tend to see is that the strategy has already been determined. But the only thing that needs to be done is write a document or an analysis which confirms the strategy. And that's backwards. So it's not the open mind, it's not the Socratic, it's not the scientific method of doing it. Here's the good way of doing it. The good way of doing it is to become very much aware of the assumptions. Hey, if I want to achieve something, if I want to achieve a strategy, what are the assumptions that I'm working with? And here's a great technique which you can use. It's called a pre-mortem. And a pre-mortem is the opposite of a post-mortem. Pre-mortem, what you do is you look at your strategy a year from now and you think you failed, miserably failed. And you ask yourself, what are the reasons that this organization or I failed? And once you understand those reasons, then you got the assumptions. And the trick is to build a system where you, on a regular basis, check those assumptions. And I think this is a scientific method if we talk about goal achieving, if we talk about strategy.
My mind, it continues to be blown. Sir,
right?
what is your web address? Where can people learn more? People want to learn more. People they're eager for this knowledge that you cannot get in college. This is some hot stuff here, sir. What is your web address?
Absolutely. The web address is www.paulrulkens.com. www.paulrulkens.com. It's my website where you can find my videos, where you can find my blog. I blog on a regular basis on these type of concepts with very practical, actionable things. There are links to my books. But also links to other material, my Twitter feed, my LinkedIn. So please feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn because I will continue to put useful information, actionable information into the hands of other people. In the end, high performance is not a simple thing, but it's not easy to do. And my objective is to help everyone with very practical things to make the next step. So www.paulrulkens.com. That's where you find all the information that you need.
Brother, I appreciate you so much. You have just been a laser show of knowledge. I am absolutely blown away. I want to listen to I cannot wait to edit this show so I can edit my voice out and then put your wisdom in there more and make it. I mean, because it is just I am blown away. Again, Paul, thank you so much for joining us.
It was a pleasure.
And now on to part 2 of today's show, where we talk about why fear is the mind killer. Dr. Breck, in recent days, months, I'm sure you've seen people that are scared.
Absolutely.
And what do you? You're a chiropractor. You see a lot of great patients.
Right. Yeah. Great people.
What are people scared about from you? And just from your experience, anecdotally, what have people been scared of?
Oh man, so many different things. So just getting sick in general. From people that aren't wearing masks. Those who are scared of those who are not. Vaccinations. Some are scared of them. Others are scared to not have them. If somebody coughs or sneezes, which it's allergy season in Oklahoma, so that does happen. You see a little more heads turning and eyes, darting towards the culprit who sneezed. Death seems to be a huge one right now. Everyone's afraid they're going to quickly die from COVID-19. So a number of things.
So let's start here for a second. And I'm not asking to paint you into a corner. I'm just wanting to make sure that the listeners get to hear your take on this, because I think this is really important.
Sure.
Where did the fear start? Or not necessarily like maybe geographically, where did it start? Mm-hmm. When did it start? Just so people, where do you feel like the fear started?
Well, from my vantage point, in the media, this idea that there's a new virus from China that's making its way to the U.S. I'm trying to think the time frame. When it was first kind of being talked about was late January, kind of early February. But it's on the other side of the world, and then very quickly at the end of February, into March, that it's here. And on the coastlines, New York, Seattle were the hotbeds, and California, and so it seemed like we were somewhat insulated, like many things here in the heartland, here in Oklahoma, and it felt like the media was really driving the fear in the first place. But it was this idea that millions of Americans are going to die from this virus was the big energy, the push behind the fear.
Well, if you guys remember, Neil Ferguson is the guy who initially made the models.
Right.
And the models predicted that 2.2 million Americans might die. And this just came out from The Telegraph. Now, The Telegraph is a big publication over there in the UK. Right. And it reads, in the history of expensive software mistakes, Mariner 1 was probably the most notorious. The unmanned spacecraft was destroyed seconds after launch from Cape Canaveral in 1962, and it veered dangerously off course due to a line of dodgy code. But nobody died, and the only hits were to NASA's budget and pride. Imperial College's modeling of the non-pharmaceutical interventions for COVID-19, which helped persuade the UK and the countries to bring in draconian lockdowns, will supersede the failed Venus space probe and could go down in history as the most devastating software mistake of all time in terms of economic costs and lives lost. Since publication of the Imperial's micro-solution model, those of us with a professional and personal interest in software development have studied the code on which the policymakers based their fateful decision to mothball our multi-trillion-pound economy and plunge millions of people into poverty and hardship, and we were profoundly disturbed at what we discovered. And they go on to explain the models were wrong.
Significantly, yeah.
And as soon as we knew that the models were wrong, one would think at that very moment that the fear would stop.
That's actually, I think, probably one of the things I've been most surprised at is once we realized that we had made decisions as policymakers and decision makers in our state governments and national government, that we would have tried to change course as quickly and carefully as possible moving forward. But I haven't seen that be the case.
And for those of you who haven't heard the audio, let me hit play. This is from Dr. Deborah Birx explaining about the models being off. Dr. Deborah Birx is the one who wears the scarf, who represents our United States COVID task force team. Listen to what she has to say about the models. Here we go.
Because remember, you had to have a fever and symptoms to get tested at this point. So still 80 facts for the American people. I'm sure many of you saw the recent report out of the UK about them adjusting completely their needs. This is really quite important. If you remember, that was the report that said there would be 500,000 deaths in the UK and 2.2 million deaths in the United States. They've adjusted that number in the UK to 20,000. So 500,000 to 20,000. We're looking into this in great detail to understand that adjustment. I'm going to say something that's a little bit complicated.
Okay, so let's think about this for a second. Initially, 2.2 million people were predicted to die.
Right.
And now we've adjusted that to be 88,000.
Right.
Which, again, is the same number of deaths as we had. The common flu in 2017, 2018 killed 80,000 people, according to the Center for Disease Control. And we know that the numbers have been falsified. We hear this time and time again. Dr. Deborah Birx, in her own words, actually came out this week, and she said, this is, I'll pull it up here. This is the actual, what she says. She says that she cannot trust the data. She says, Dr. Birx says, there is nothing from the CDC that I can trust.
Right.
So now that we know that we can't trust the numbers
Right.
that were causing the fear, and we can't trust the models that were causing the fear, the question is, why are people still scared? So I'm going to ask you, Jeff. Jeff, I want to get your take. You're a business owner. You own Boom Mobile. Why are people scared? You're just trying to sell. You are trying to sell cell phone plans. You're trying to market and grow your business.
Right.
You're trying to run the company. You are not an infectious disease expert. You're not claiming to be. You're not a doctor. But I'm asking you this. I mean, we know that 2.2 million people were initially predicted to die, and now we know we've adjusted that number to 88,000. And now Dr. Deborah Birx says she cannot trust the data. So why are people still scared in your mind?
Well, I mean, fear does a lot of crazy things to people, and most folks aren't self-thinkers. So they don't believe in what they actually believe in themselves, or even think through what they believe in. They just want somebody to tell them what to do. And that's what they're doing. They're just following. They're just sheep.
You're saying most people repeat that idea again. That was pretty powerful. You said most people don't what?
I just don't believe that most people have their own belief system and their own thought process where they believe in what they actually believe in. I think that we're dealing with a lot of sheep that just like to follow. And right now we've been followed down a path that's been very destructive for our economy and for our lives.
You know, it's very interesting. But Adolf Hitler used a flu to herd people. I don't know. Breck, have you ever heard about this before? Have you ever heard this idea?
I have.
Okay. Now, I want to make sure the listeners get this idea. And maybe once you get this idea, maybe once it gets into your cranium, it'll feel better. Back in the day, Hitler started this thing called quarantine camps. Quarantine camps. And he had these people called tracers that were sent to take you away if you had the virus. And I will read to you the New York Post article. Okay, so the New York Post article reads, Influenza pandemic fueled rise of Nazi Party, research shows. The influenza pandemic that gripped the globe a century ago helped the Nazi Party to rise to power in Germany, a new study says. Right-wing extremists such as the Nazi Party won a greater share of the votes in the Party of Germany that suffered larger numbers of flu deaths during the pandemic that started in 1918, according to research from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York. The link held up when researchers accounted for factors such as past right-wing voting. Now, we'll continue. Their version of right-wing and our version of right-wing are different. The point is Hitler used fear to control people. So Elon Musk, who is not a infectious disease expert, he sent out a tweet that says, fear is the mind killer. And so I want to get into that for a second. Mm-hmm. Fear is the mind killer. So let's think about this in the game of business. How do you deal with fear? So I'm going to teach everybody how to deal with fear today. That's my plan, to teach you how to deal with fear, to teach you the super moves that you can use to deal with fear. But let's introduce a very scary situation for a business owner. Breck, have you ever invested in your business and whatever you invested in didn't work?
Yes.
Give me an example of something that you've invested in your business. Was it like maybe a mass mailer, maybe an advertisement, maybe an employee? Tell me a situation of something you put money into and it did not work.
So my first foray into radio advertising did not work at all. I was really excited because the very first time that the ad played, I got a call while the ad was still on. So I was super excited. Unfortunately, that was also the last call. So I got literally one call from the ad and not a single one, and it ran for 6 months.
6 months?
Yep.
6 months of glory.
Yeah.
Now
a blaze of glory.
Now let me explain to the listeners what I'm talking about today. I want to make sure we get this idea because I can relate to you. I remember when I did an advertisement back in the day, I bought an ad, and it was a publication. It was a local magazine and where it was a bridal it wasn't a bridal magazine, but it was an advertisement, a full-page ad in a local magazine. And I was fired up, Jeff. It was awesome. It was the Tulsa People. And I was pumped because I was a Tulsa person, and I was in the Tulsa People.
Right.
And I had bought that ad, and I'm a sheeple. You know what I'm saying? I'm a young business owner. I buy the ad in the Tulsa People, and I'm fired up because I'm a sheeple. So the lady from the ad, the company who I bought the ad from, she calls me and says, "Your ad's looking good." I'm going, "It is looking good," because I want it to look good because I bought the ad, and I had no data, no leads. No leads came in. Nobody called me from the ad. And Tulsa People's a great magazine, but it might not have been the best advertisement in the best publication at that time. And I was almost afraid to stop advertising because I had been so fired up about the advertisement. I had told all my employees, this is going to be huge. Huge. It was like a sunk cost.
You were as emotionally invested as you were financially.
I was emotionally invested. I told people, we're going to buy a big ad. We're going full page, baby. We're promoting the DJ business. Right. DJconnection.com is going to be huge as a result of the Tulsa People. Now, my Yellow Page ads were still making money. I still got leads off of that. Still getting leads from the bridal show. But, Jeff, why do you think in my young disc jockey entrepreneur mind, why would I not want to stop advertising after I had been so passionate about advertising?
Because you already bought into it. I mean, it's the analogy that I use with everybody that buy a car. Like, when did you come off the car lot mad about the fact or telling you all the negative things about the car that you just bought? Even though that you might have just got screwed over on the deal.
Yeah.
You have nothing negative to say. I mean, you're only regurgitating what the salesperson gave you. Same with the ad.
So you buy the ad, and once you bought the ad, and in my case, once I bought the advertisement, I had committed to buying the advertisement. And I had talked about it.
Yeah, confirmation bias. Right. I mean, you want it to work.
I wanted it to work.
Yeah,
it had
you
to
need
work.
it to work.
I needed it to work.
Yeah.
I had told people it's going to work.
Mm-hmm.
Then when the radio rep called me and said, "Hey, dude, I'm hearing a lot of people telling me they're seeing the ad." No, seriously. He told
They're
me,
just not calling.
He says, "I'm hearing a lot of people are seeing the ad."
Mm-hmm.
So what do you think I did, Brick?
Double down.
I tell my team, guys, a lot of people are seeing the ad.
It's working. It's just going to take a little longer.
Everything is working. Yeah. It's just getting going. Mm-hmm. And the ad rep calls me back and he says, I'm telling you what, Clay, usually for this kind of ad, it takes to really brand yourself as the authority.
You need like 6 months, buddy.
Yeah, you got to go 6 months to a year.
Yeah.
We find, and so
people need to see it 3 times, 4 times.
I'm advertising. And then I get this momentum going. This commitment. I'm telling people. Now, pretty soon, it's like once you have been that what could I possibly be afraid of after having committed verbally so much verbal commitment, so much emotional commitment? Breck, after I put that much energy and time and money into the ad, month 2, month 3, I've been talking about it so much. I've been telling people are telling me they're seeing the ad.
Well, my wife will tell you, I'm never wrong. So I never have to admit that I'm wrong. But that sounds like a lot of what you would have had to do is tell all these people, you know what, I was wrong. And so, yeah, I mean, there's a huge conflict for you in having to swallow your pride, to admit failure, and say, hey, I'm wrong. When you were championing the cause, to say, hey, let's go all in, and then let's double down on top of all in.
So now what happens is now you got this. You have to make this decision.
Mm-hmm.
Are you going to admit you're wrong, or are you going to keep going with it?
Right.
But there's a fear, because fear is the mind killer. There's a fear. So now you've been posting for like 3 months now. I mean, you've been saying the model predicts 2.2 million people might die. Now, I've said this on this show, and just so listeners know, listen, I'm 39 years old. I am old enough now to have realized the jackassery of my early ages, my early business career, my early career. I actually wrote a book about it called Jackassery. But I'm old enough to now look back at it and go, that was dumb. Right. You know what I'm saying?
You have perspective.
A perspective.
Yes. Which is something we seem to have lost in all of this craziness right now.
So what happens is, this is what happens. There's the news comes out. The news that comes out on Fox or CNN, they say, this just in from Fox. News report shows model out of UK predicts 2.2 million lives could be lost from the pandemic. Then the next thing comes out. It's the next report. It says, the World Health Organization officially rules coronavirus a pandemic. And then Oklahoma City Thunder have decided to stop their game. They called off the game immediately because of the pandemic. 2.2 million lives could be lost. People are dying everywhere. And we're posting on Facebook. And then we need the hospitals could be overwhelmed. They could be overwhelmed. The hospitals. We must do a temporary pause. Wait a minute. No one's dying, but we need to keep it closed because, yeah. And now we've been closed for a month, and no one's dying from the coronavirus, and we know the cases are being inflated, and the model doesn't work, but we got to keep it closed. And then, do you realize how many Facebook posts I would have to take down right now if I was wrong? Holy crap, I was wrong. I told my kids I was wrong. I'm going to be an idiot at work. The one guy who told me I was wrong is right, and I hate him. That's what's going on. That's what's happening. And so now, the nefariousness of the situation. Let me just explain to listeners the nefariousness of this situation. But I want to get back to this core topic as well about fear is the mind killer.
Absolutely.
Think about this, folks. The model that was initially used to predict the death of 2.2 million people has now been debunked. The model is fake. The model, if you read the article about the model, people have now looked at the model for the first time. Do you understand? I've talked to the heads of states. I've talked to the very highly elected officials at the very top who have told me that they have not looked at the model.
Right.
I mean, we're talking about entire states being shut down, cities being shut down, and no one's looked at the model. And we finally, 3 months into it, are looking at the model. And this model is jackassery at the absolute. I mean, it is the worst model of all time. I mean, but now that we know the models are fake and we know that the number of cases, according to the CDC, the guidelines they rolled out were designed to create a record number of cases. The guidelines put out by the CDC were intentionally corrupt to inflate the numbers. But now that we know that, why is it that only the blue states won't open their states?
Well, because they pivoted. Now the fear is, oh, well, we were successful. We stopped all those billions of lives, right? And if we open up, they will come back, as if that was true.
Jackassery. But what happens is we have fear is blocking our ability as a culture to see the truth. Now, let me give another example for the listeners. This might be a fun one. Yesterday, and I screenshotted it, and I screenshotted it, and I'll show you guys. Yesterday, President Trump sent out a tweet talking about how Twitter and Facebook are unjustly censoring your posts. So if you post anything at all right now about the models being wrong or about the number of cases being wrong, Facebook is deleting them. So this is an example. So this is yesterday. Donald Trump posted, this is his tweet yesterday. The radical left is in total command and control of Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Google. The administration is working to remedy this illegal situation. Stay tuned and send names and events. Thank you, Michelle. And Michelle, she was the one who broke the story. And there's a picture of her. He played a press conference from her. You can see it. And guess what happened to that tweet there, Nathan? Guess what happened to the tweet from President Trump? What do you think?
I think it accidentally got deleted.
It got deleted. They're censoring the President of the United States. Now that we know of the nefariousness of this situation, we have to not let the fear block the logic. So we're going to go through a checklist of all the ways in a business career that fear could block logic. We're going to fire them off, okay? So one is the bad hire. Talk to me about this, Breck, the bad hire. You hire somebody, and you hype them up, though. You're like, I got this guy. He's my number one draft pick. He's going to be good. He's related. He's going to be awesome. He's related. This guy, I know, he's so good. He's so qualified. He's so bona fide. He's your roommate from college, and he can't find a job, and he's 39. I mean, you've come in, you brought in the chosen one.
Right.
The golden boy. Why do people stick with a bad hire?
for all the same reasons we've already talked about. You're invested, like I said, emotionally and financially, and you don't want to be wrong. I mean, nobody wants to be wrong, and so you've got to figure out a way to make it right when it wasn't right to begin with.
Interesting. The bad hire.
Yeah.
Nathan, the bad hire. Why do we want to stick with the bad hire? Well, if we know the bad hire is not the move, why do we want to stick with the bad hire?
Ego. It is 9 times out of 10. It's ego. It's that you don't want to admit, like you said before, that we were wrong, and that's swallowing your pride and not saying. Sometimes it's because we're just not thinking about what's best for the business. We're just thinking about our own, posterity. Or, and here's the worst one, I think. Sometimes you don't know. Like you're not paying. Like I think Jeff talked about this last week. Said sometimes we don't want to look at the numbers because we don't want to know how bad it is. So we pretend if we haven't seen the numbers, we don't know how bad it is. But everyone around us knows.
Mm-hmm.
Now, another thing I see in business is taking a stand against corruption. Now, let me give you an example of this. Years ago, I got invited to go to Washington, D.C. to receive an award. Have you guys been to D.C., Jeff? Have you been to Washington?
I have. I was there in 2011, actually.
Have you been to the Palms restaurant?
No.
Have you been to the Palms?
Across the street. Yes, I have.
Oh, it's a very nice restaurant.
Yep.
And I got invited to go there to receive an award. So I go, and I'm hanging out with elected officials. I met, by the way, Senator Coburn, just a great man. He was a great guy. Met a lot of other people, not good guys. And this meal is expensive. I'm talking like crazy expensive.
It is.
And they said, well, we'll take care of it. The people taking me out. We'll take care of it. And I said, this is expensive, though. I mean, this is, and I'm cheap. We went yesterday to Russo's to get some food for the kids.
Mm-hmm.
And it was $50. And I was pissed. That's 7 of us.
Mm-hmm.
$8 a piece. No, I'm not being serious. I was pissed. I hate going out to eat. I hate it more. I hate it. I cannot stand it. So I'm looking going, this wasn't $8 a salad. I mean, we went to the Palms. I want to say it was like maybe $150 a person.
Right.
Hate that place. God. So we get out of there, and I want to pay my fair share because I'm out to dinner. And so I said, I'll pay for my part. That's cool. And they said, no, the taxpayers got it.
Ooh.
And it was super expensive. And
Right.
I watched this behavior the entire time I was there. And I told Vanessa, I cannot ever be around these kinds of people again. Just the corruption. Because you've got people in our country who are living check to check, paycheck to paycheck. You have people that are trying to work hard, barely making it in some industries. And then you've got people at the top just spending money, borrowing money. It bothered me.
Well, and likely they're having those dinners all the time.
Every day, every meal.
Yeah.
So but we have to take a stand against corruption at some point in your business. And at some point, you're going to have to do it. And the pastor I work with, Pastor Brian Gibson, we teamed up with Fox and Friends, the people on Fox. If you guys have watched Fox TV, that's the Fox I'm talking about. And we teamed up with him this week. And I cannot tell you how proud I am that he did it, because a lot of people want to stand up against something, but then when it comes down to doing it, they don't actually do it. They want to. I'm going to take a stand. I will take a stand. And I keep seeing pastors, and I'm not trying to rip on pastors. I'm just ripping on anybody who doesn't take a stand. They say, I want to stand up, and I want to say this is corrupt, and I want to team up with you guys. I want to open my church. I want to, but I can't in my state yet because we're in, phase 1, and we can't open until we're in phase 5. Well, the idea that you can't peaceably assemble right now because we're hiding from a virus that initially scared us into submitting because of a model that predicted 2.2 million people. So the model predicted 2.2 million people would die, and that's wrong. Was wrong. It's debunked. It's crazy. The number of cases is wrong. It's debunked. So we know they're wrong. So if we've got a church, we need to peaceably assemble, which is what I shall be doing today. And there are 8,000 plus churches now across the country who've agreed to open.
Yes.
And Fox teamed up with us, and they are now having Pastor Brian on Fox. So let me cue up the audio. This is Pastor Brian Gibson, and he is going to be opening his church in about 2 hours from now. And he will be opening his doors. And when he does, he's in Kentucky. And there will be some police that are showing up. And I say, yes, because we want to be arrested. If you have to be arrested to peaceably assemble, that's good, because that's the fight we have to make. But if you're saying, I don't want to go to church because I might get arrested, you're part of the problem. So, but fear kills logic. Fear kills the mind. We can't. We have to force the action. So let me play the audio. This is from Fox News real quick. This is Fox News. Let me hit play here. Private commercial first.
So Lit Mobile just sent me this solar wireless battery pack.
Oh, yeah.
I'm excited. Let's see what's inside.
Buy this thing, folks. Buy this.
I really like the build.
Ooh.
It's got hand grips on the side.
Buy this thing.
It's shockproof and water resistant. The power bank has 20,000 milliamps, which can fully charge your phone up to 8 times. It's also got a convenient loop for
Keep
carabiner.
buying. Here we go.
One pastor calls for action in the fight for the right to worship.
It's time for every pastor, every rabbi, every Muslim leader, every religious leader to exercise their First Amendment rights. Come on, let the lion inside you begin to roar and take your people back into the houses of worship.
All right, his message comes as congregations across the country face gathering restrictions, even as other businesses begin to reopen. So here to discuss his position to peaceably gather this Sunday
is his church pastor, Brian Gibson. Pastor, thanks for joining us. What is your message for this weekend? What is your message to governors in the states where you have churches, and what are you doing this weekend?
Well, my message to the governors, not only in our states, but all across America, is that church is essential and that we have a First Amendment right to peaceably gather. As a matter of fact, we're calling pastors to peaceablygather.com to join with us to stand up for our religious liberties. And we're really just saying and asking this question. We were all willing to go online. We were all willing to, be good neighbors, be caring and compassionate whenever this outbreak first started. But as it wasn't 5%, 4%, 1% less, we saw other businesses open up around the country, and we saw the church be restricted and being called non-essential, while we're one of the entities that has the first mention in the First Amendment. So our message to everyone is, pastors, get your churches going, religious leaders, let's step up and roar. And why could the Starbucks be open, the McDonald's be open? I had an event that was shut down by the health department at my church, but everybody else is open and the church has to close. Why is that reasonable? Why is it logical?
Makes sense. Here's a number of states, 11 of them, suing to reopen, suing their own states, including yours of Kentucky. There's the map right there. Your guidelines there in Kentucky for this Sunday, as you open up, you're trying to do it responsibly. You want to reduce occupancy to match the local guidelines, practice social distancing by spacing families 6 feet apart.
Quick timeout. I'm not going to be doing that. I will not be spacing families 6 feet apart, because this whole thing is a lie. It's jackassery. It's deceit. It's nefarious. It's terrible.
Dismiss attendees aisle by aisle so they don't get too close in the rush out.
You're going to hug everybody.
All staff wearing masks and gloves, increasing sanitation efforts. And you're saying that if Walmart can be open and I can do this responsibly, there's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to do this, right?
I'll save you a spot on my
Yes, we want to be responsible. We want to be caring. We want to follow all the same guidelines. But when Walmart has hundreds of people in it, Kroger has tons of people in it, when did 1 hour on Sunday morning become the deadliest hour in America? That all functions 7 days a week. We're talking about 1 hour a week, and we're talking about our First Amendment rights.
So let's take a look at Kentucky's in-service church guidelines that are set to start May 20th, just a few days after you want to do this. Services should limit attendance to 33% capacity. And
by the way, the CDC is the most corrupt organization of all time, so just don't even listen to that crap.
Staff and congregants wear face coverings, avoid congregational or choir
avoid singing, really.
And consider taking temperatures, providing hand sanitizer, things
taking temperatures, get out of here.
That. I guess the question is, it's a difference of a few days here. Why do you feel, like this is something that you need to do and you're calling on others to do on Sunday?
Well, we launched on that day because it was before the governor allowed us. We felt like they'd already severely overstepped their bounds and had come against our constitutional liberties.
So we've got 8,000 churches that are now opening from coast to coast. And I talked to so many pastors yesterday. Yesterday I was working the phones, talking to pastors. The leads are coming in. It's so cool. I can show you guys real quick. These leads are coming in. Pastors from coast to coast look at all these leads coming in. These are all these churches signing up right now. They're all opening. So right now you got 3 million people breaking the law simultaneously. I love it. Breaking the law, breaking the law.
I'll argue with you and say that they're enforcing the law.
Exactly.
I mean, it's our First Amendment right, so they're actually enforcing the law.
Exactly. But again, we want to take a stand against corruption. But again, we have fear. We want to fire the bad hire, but we have fear. Here's another idea. What if you know what to do, but you're afraid of change because you just have a momentum to dysfunction? Have you ever seen that, Jeff, before, where a business guy, maybe yourself, I know with me from back in the day, I fought against checklists. I wouldn't use checklists. I was like, I'm going to be checklist free, and I'm not going to use them because they're stupid. I don't need a checklist. I'm a disc jockey. I don't need a checklist to remind myself of the equipment I need to bring. Except for like every show, I would show up and go, "Where's my mic stand? I forgot it." And then I'm like, I got to work on my memory. Ooh, better memory. Have you ever seen this done in business where business people fight against a checklist?
I'm one of them. I go in and out of it all the time. I fight the checklist. I fight, and I love change, but I don't fight. So my fear of change isn't necessarily because I don't want to change. It's just how is it going to affect me when I make that change? Because that means I'm going to have to add more to my checklist if I make that change.
Breck, have you ever fought against checklists, writing things down, using a to-do list, using a calendar? Have you ever fought against these sort of things?
Absolutely. Yes.
Why do we do that? Like, why are grown men saying, the most successful people in the world have a checklist and a to-do list, and they have a day planner, but for me, I'm going to use an app for that. Why? What is the deal?
Because we all feel like, I'm a smart person. If that was really necessary, I would have figured that out already on my own. I don't need somebody else to tell me that that's a better plan than my plan that I created. So, yeah, I mean, we're limited by our own thinking.
I think my superpower is that I'm infinitely simple. Yep. And because I'm uninfluenced by those around me, I think that's what allows me to have influence. But I've thought about this before because, like, with the people were going, I was watching the Thunder game, and all of a sudden the ref runs out, sprints out, and we got to stop the game. The coronavirus. I was thinking, that's weird. So I looked it up. I stayed up all night looking it up, and I found out that the coronavirus only kills elderly people with a severely compromised immune system. And I'm thinking,
elite athletes at the prime of their career, probably not the
They're probably
the fear.
not. They're probably not the kind of people that could die from this. So who cares? And then I started looking up how many people die from the flu, and I started looking this up, and I'm going, this doesn't make any sense.
No.
But everyone says, well, everyone's doing it.
Right.
Everyone's afraid. How could you not be afraid? Everyone's afraid. Everyone's talking about everyone's afraid. Everyone is talking about it's afraid. We're afraid. Everyone, which brings me to my next point. Not doing what everyone else is doing. Chiropractors. I love chiropractors. Love chiropractors. Love them. Love the organizations that are part of. Love it. These ongoing education festivals. You go to these conferences where everybody is telling you that chiropractic care is on the verge of ending.
Every time. Yeah.
Gyms. They have these organizations for fitness gyms where they say that in the future, all personal training is going to go online. All of it. People are done with the gym. They're going to want to do it online. They're going to want to watch you on YouTube. Nobody wants to go to a gym. And as a human, I'm going, no. There's no way that's going to happen. Why? Because I don't know anybody that works out from home while watching a virtual class. I don't know anybody who's in great shape who does that. I know people who buy the DVDs, who buy the videos, who buy the streaming service, who buy the program. They got P90X, they got the YouTube P90X, they got P90X on steroids on YouTube. But I don't see people working out. Breck, I mean, you see these things.
Right.
Why in industries is everybody so obsessed with doing what everybody else is doing?
Well, if you blaze your own way and it doesn't go well, then you've got egg on your face. And so, yeah, I think for so many people, it's just easier to, as Jeff said, be a sheeple, follow the herd and not rock the boat. And, you haven't put your neck out there. And so you haven't risked much, or so you think. This is all mindset because you've lost the opportunity to do something great in the process of just being ordinary, to, just be well, I mean, we've had that quote from Bishop T.D. Jakes.
Yep.
You know, as far as ordinary and extraordinary. And, you know, when you're just going along, that's all you'll ever be is ordinary. And personally, I want to be extraordinary. I want my team to be extraordinary. I want our clinic to be extraordinary, and I want our patients to have an extraordinary life because of that.
What you said is very, very profound. And I found this to be true. Most people want to do what most people are doing. So let's talk about your business for a second. So Boom Mobile, right? Explain to the listeners what Boom Mobile does. Well, what's your website? What does Boom Mobile do?
Yeah, sure. It's boom.us, and we are a mobile phone service company that has contracts with 3 major big carriers.
How do you make money?
We make money by reducing other people's phone bills.
Why doesn't everybody use you then?
That's a matter of choice and a matter of following the herd.
How often do you get asked that? Well, if it's so good, why doesn't everybody use your company then?
Oh, I get asked that daily.
Yeah. This is what happens to me. People say, I know I've gone up to the Thrive Time Show website. I've seen the testimonials. And if your method works so well, why doesn't everybody use it? There's multiple reasons. One is that I only take on 160 clients. 2, people don't want to do what works because they want to do what everyone's doing, which doesn't work. It's like, it's almost, you have to have that mindset if you're going to be a successful person. If everybody's going to college and everybody graduates with a ton of debt and everybody gets a Prius and everybody lives in a McMansion and everybody gets impossibly in debt and everybody doesn't save any money. I mean, according to Forbes, 78% of people live check to check. If 78% of people are check to check, you should probably check and see what 78% of people are doing and not do that.
Yes.
If True. Gallup shows that 70% of people hate their job, you should probably figure out what most people are doing and not do that to hate your job. If 78% of men, according to the Washington Post, cheat on their spouse, you should probably figure out what causes that and not do that. If 85% of people are lying on their resumes to get jobs, you probably should interview the 85% of people and find out what they're doing, write down their pro tips, and then don't do that. Right. Chiropractic care. Mm-hmm. Most people think you're crazy.
Yeah.
I would say 70% of people, maybe you have better data. I'm just talking about the people that I know. Yeah. The people that I know, you would not believe how much crap I take for having you on the show all the time. It's like, you have that chiropractor on, like a fake doctor. What's the deal? Mm-hmm. And I'm going, how's he fake? Well, those guys are into like all this natural herbal stuff. They don't even recommend the FDA drugs. These guys are like, why do people think chiropractors are categorically, systemically, universally crazy?
Well, the biggest reason, I believe, is because for so much of our history, which chiropractic, has kind of been in some form of existence for a very, very long time, because there's elements of it in Russian bone setting, in Oriental medicine, traditional Oriental medicine, and other places. Ayurvedic medicine has a similar type of practice.
Ayurvedic medicine?
Yeah, like Indian.
Indian?
Yeah, so like the Middle East.
This just in. I learned a new word, but I forgot it again. Tell me the word again.
Ayurvedic.
Ayurvedic?
Ayurvedic with a V.
Ayurvedic?
Yep.
How do you spell that, maybe?
Oh, man.
I'll tell you. Ayurvedic medicine.
I think it's Ayerv.
Ayurvedic. Oh, that's a tough word to spell. It's
A-U.
A-U.
Yeah.
It's Ayurvedic. Ayurvedic medicine. You're just dropping words on me here.
So anyway, but here in Western medicine, chiropractic was sort of discovered in the late 1800s, side by side with doctors of osteopathic medicine, DOs, and with the emphasis of health being from within, that we all have this innate ability to heal our bodies, have that inborn in us, and that the nervous system is the master control system of the body. And so with that understanding and appreciation moved forward, osteopathic medicine was very similar in that they believed we have this innate ability to heal, but that the most important system was the cardiovascular system. So that was kind of the ideology differences. So very similar. They were actually founded by friends, A.T. Steele on the osteopathic side and D.D. Palmer on the chiropractic side. And over time, DOs became more like MDs, and chiropractors stayed more in the fringe and on the side and more true to its roots, in my opinion. But there was a big push by the medical community and the AMA.
What's the AMA?
The American Medical Association.
Okay.
To actually kill chiropractic, to stop it. And there was a huge lawsuit back in the 70s that the AMA lost. The medical schools had been teaching their students negative things about chiropractic. They were trying to destroy the industry and the colleges, and trying to disprove and put out false information. So there's a lot of slander and things going on. And so anyway, they lost that lawsuit, had to pay some form of restitution back to the chiropractic colleges, because I don't know how you pay back a profession as a whole, but that's how they saw fit. So basically, medical schools stopped talking about it in some sense back in the 70s. And so there has been a huge shift ever since, but that's still, 80 plus years of one profession that was in the driver's seat of healthcare in the U.S. Trying to dissuade people from using another competitive form of healthcare.
You want to hear something cool about the guy who's largely leading our medical system, Dr. Fauci?
Mm-hmm.
He is the leader of gain of function research.
Right.
You want to hear what gain of function research is? This is gain of function research. Gain of function is the following: growing, you're isolating a virus from an animal, and you're mixing it with human tissues to create a more contagious virus. That's called gain of function. So that the guy who's in charge of our current medical system, Fauci, is all about gain of function research. Brett, can you explain to me how that helps the human body to create viruses by mixing human, isolating viruses from animals and mixing them with human tissue?
Well, yeah. I mean, first of all, the medical community as a whole doesn't all agree that that's a good idea. So there are doctors who are against that idea for the reasons I'll go on to explain. So Dr. Fauci's on the side that's for gain of function research, and there are a number of doctors that are against it. And the reason they're against it is because what you fear to happen naturally, a virus jumping from species to species or having its ability to become more adaptable and to mutate and grow, is something that could happen over the course of many years and a number of other circumstances, whereas this gain of function research, they're actually doing this in a lab to accelerate that process and make it happen. And so you're creating the thing that you fear. And the idea behind gain of function research is that you would catch it ahead of time. You'll see what's going to happen and then come up with a solution well before it happens. But in the process, you're actually making the thing you fear happen. So it almost feels like you go into the script of, the Terminator movie.
Let me share this with you. You know the guy who was Dr. Fauci's right-hand man?
Mm-hmm.
His name is spelled Thejeang. I don't know how to pronounce that. I just finished reading. I just finished reading Plague of Corruption. I want everybody to look this guy up. Everybody look this guy up. This is how you spell his name. Thejeang. This was his right-hand man. And you know what happened to him when he pointed out to Dr. Fauci that gain of function research probably shouldn't happen? You want to guess?
What's that?
He died.
Accidentally, I'm sure.
Yes.
Gain of function.
Yeah. Now I'm serious though. This is Martin Luther King Jr.
Right.
He decided that he would stand up against racism.
Right.
And I want to read to you. This was the letter that the FBI sent to Martin Luther King Jr. I'm going to read this is the actual letter sent to Martin Luther King Jr. from the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This is actually sent to him. This was reported, by the way, the entire letter appears in the New York Times from 2014. You can read it. It says, this is the letter the FBI wrote to Martin Luther King Jr., who pointed out that it's not fair that they can't peaceably assemble. It's not right that they can't peaceably assemble due to the color of their skin. This is the letter. King, in the view of your low-grade, abnormal personal behavior, I will not dignify your name with either a Mr. or a Reverend or a Doctor. And your last name calls to mind only the type of king such as Henry V, and his countless acts of adultery and immoral conduct lower than that of a beast. King, look into your heart. You know you are a complete fraud and a great liability to all Negroes. White people in this country have enough friends of their own, but I am sure that they don't have one at this. I'm sure they don't have one at this time that is anywhere your equal. You are no clergy, and you know it. And I repeat that you are a colossal fraud. I will continue reading. King, there's only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days to do it. The exact number has been selected for a specific reason. It has a definite practical significance. You are done. But there is but only one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, abnormal, fraudulent self is barred to the nation. That's the Federal Bureau of Investigation writing to Martin Luther King Jr. for standing up against what is wrong. So anytime that you stand up for what's right, you're going to have pushback, and it's often violent, it's often negative, it's often career-ending, it's often not positive. Now, the final point, and I want to get Jason on the mic here in just a second to discuss this, is holding people accountable. Anytime you grow a business from me to we, we've got problems. Anytime you grow from me to we, anytime that you grow your business from you to two and more, you have some serious problems. This is what T.D. Jakes says about it.
So Jesus, who is exceptional, is having a conversation with ordinary. And exceptional and ordinary always have a conflict. Anytime exceptional people dwell in the midst of ordinary thinking people, there's always going to be conflict.
Now, Albert Einstein, who couldn't be here today because he is dead. Albert Einstein's not here. He said, great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. Great spirits have always encountered violent opposition from mediocre minds. So it begins. So, Jeff, I want to get your final take on this, and I'm going to have Jason take your mic there. Boom Mobile. You're going to help people save money on their cell phone plans. How much do you help people save money when they switch to you?
Anywhere from 20 to 40%.
And if I say that's crap, do you encourage the listeners to take the challenge and compare rates and see if it's crap?
Absolutely.
But how confident are you that you'll be right?
100%.
How many new customers have you signed up this month?
Over 13,000.
Wow.
Over 13,000
this month.
And on behalf of some of the
16
listeners,
days.
On behalf of some of the listeners, I'll say this. We have a listener right now thinking this. It's a bunch of crap. It's a bunch of crap. Because if it was so good, everyone would do it. I would encourage you to take the challenge.
Absolutely.
Check out Boom Mobile. See if it's a good thing. Maybe it is. Maybe it isn't. Check it out. Take the challenge. All right.
Sure.
And if you're out there in the Tulsa area and you're looking for a chiropractor, I mean, maybe you say, but chiropractors are crap. I've heard they're crap. If you ever hear, because the argument is, well, most people say chiropractors are crap.
Mm-hmm.
Then in my weird world, if I hear that most people think something's crap, I'm in to try it.
You want to check it out?
Yeah. I am. That's my move. That's my move. So, Jason, I want to go through this checklist with you. You're a man of color. You're not a white guy.
This is true.
Being that you are not a white guy, Candace Owens recently, she is a very outspoken African-American who has started a movement, and it is a powerful movement, where she is saying, if you, Kanye West, by the way, is on this team, and it's an idea called blackout, where she's saying, if you're black, if you're brown, if you're anything but white, think about why you vote the way you do, and maybe now's the time to make that change. Mm-hmm. Does it bother people? I mean, if you even bring up a thought about following the Constitution and not getting handouts as a person of color, what kind of reaction do you get from people if you bring up if you're talking to somebody who is also black, and you bring up the conversation that perhaps we don't all need to vote Democrat every single time? How does that conversation go?
Well, typically it ends with a heated debate, and you get called an Uncle Tom, which I've been called a lot.
Really?
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And what does that Uncle Tom mean to you?
Well, it's in reference to the book Uncle Tom's Cabin. Basically, you are a betrayer to the herd or your race because you believe something outside of the guidelines.
I'm going to play audio. This is Candace Owens. She is, this was from Fox News. I want you to hear this. Let me hit play.
Time has expired, Ms. Owens.
So she is doing she's asked to testify at a U.S. House hearing discussing hate crimes. And just listen to her, because this woman has an anointing on her life, a gift, a calling that is powerful. But I call it the truth cannon. So listen to what she says. It's blow your mind. Here we go.
Time has expired. Ms. Owens.
That was unfair.
It was not unfair. You had plenty of extra time. Ms.
No,
Owens.
I did not.
Ms. Owens.
Mr. Chairman, There we go. Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Mr. Collins, thank you for having me here today. I received word on my way in that many of the journalists were confused as to why I was invited, and none of them knew that I myself was the victim of a hate crime when I was in high school. That's something that very few people know about me because the media and the journalists and the left are not interested in telling the truth about me because I don't fit the stereotype of what they like to see in black people. I'm a Democrat. I support the President of the United States, and I advocate for things that are actually affecting the black community. I'm honored to be here today in front of you all because the person sitting behind me is my 75-year-old grandfather. I've always considered myself to be my grandfather's child, and I mean to say that my sense of humor, my passion, and my work ethic all comes from the man that is sitting behind me. My grandfather grew up on a sharecropping farm in the segregated South. He grew up in an America where words like racism and white nationalism held real meaning under the Democrat Party's Jim Crow laws. My grandfather's first job was given to him at the age of 5 years old, and his job was to lay tobacco out to dry in an attic in the South. My grandfather has picked cotton, and he has also had experiences with a Democrat terrorist organization of that time, the Ku Klux Klan. They would regularly visit his home, and they would shoot bullets into it. They had an issue with his father, my great-grandfather. During my formative years, I had the privilege of growing up in my grandfather's home. It's going to shock the committee, but not once, not in a single breath of a conversation did my grandfather tell me that I could not do something because of my skin color. Not once did my grandfather hold a gripe against the white man. I was simply never taught to view myself as a victim because of my heritage. I learned about faith in God, family, and hard work. Those were the only lessons of my childhood. There isn't a single adult today that in good conscience would make the argument that America is a more racist or a more white nationalist society than it was when my grandfather was growing up. And yet we're hearing these terms sent around today because what they want to say is that brown people need to be scared, which seems to be the narrative that we hear every 4 years right ahead of a presidential election. Here are some things we never hear. 75% of the black boys in California don't meet state reading standards. In inner cities like Baltimore, within 5 high schools and 1 middle school, not a single student was found to be proficient in math or reading in 2016. The single motherhood rate in the black community, which was at 23% in the 1960s when my grandfather was coming up, is at a staggering 74% today. I am guessing there will be no committee hearings about that. There are more black babies aborted than born alive in cities like New York, and you have Democrat Governor Andrew Cuomo lighting up buildings to celebrate late-term abortions. I could go on and on. My point is that white nationalism did not do any of those things that I just brought up. Democrat policies did. Let me be clear. The hearing today is not about white nationalism or hate crimes. It's about fear-mongering, power, and control. It's a preview of the Democrat 2020 election strategy, same as the Democrat 2016 election strategy. They blame Facebook, they blame Google, they blame Twitter. Really, they blame the birth of social media, which has disrupted their monopoly on minds. They called this hearing because they believe that if it wasn't for social media, voices like mine would never exist, that my movement Blexit, which is inspiring black Americans to leave the Democrat Party, would have never come about, and they certainly believe that Donald Trump would not be in office today. Looking on the next thing to focus on now that the Russian collusion hoax has fallen apart. What they won't tell you about the statistics and the rise of white nationalism is that they've simply changed the data set points by widening the definition of hate crimes and upping the number of reporting agencies that are able to report on them. What I mean to say is that they're manipulating statistics. The goal here is to scare blacks, Hispanics, gays, and Muslims into helping them censor dissenting opinions, ultimately into helping them regain control of our country's narrative, which they feel that they lost. They feel that President Donald Trump should not have beat Hillary. If they actually were concerned about white nationalism, they would be holding hearings on Antifa, a far-left, violent, white gang who determined one day in Philadelphia in August that I, a black woman, was not fit to sit in a restaurant. They chased me out. They yelled race traitor to a group of black and Hispanic police officers who formed a line to protect me from their ongoing assaults. They threw water at me. They threw eggs at me. And the leftist media remained silent on it. If they were serious about the rise of hate crimes, they may perhaps be examining themselves and the hate that they have drummed up in this country. Bottom line is that white supremacy, racism, white nationalism, words that once held real meaning, have now become nothing more than election strategies. Every 4 years, the black...
Now, she can't say that. I mean, you can't. I mean, she's saying the truth, but it doesn't go well. So anytime that you are going to have success in your life and you're going to share the truth, you're going to run into violent opposition.
Right.
So, Jason, I want you to just share your thoughts on this. Whenever we hire somebody, the elephant in the room, and on the checklist, it clearly states when we hire them in the operations manual, on the hiring checklist, the onboarding checklist, all the documentation, it clearly states they can't be on their what during the workday?
Phone.
And when you bring up, hey, you can't be on the phone. We have great people now.
Yeah.
But in the past, when we did not have such a great people, what kind of feedback did you get when you had to point out to a person who was in their mid-30s or 40s that they can't bring their phone to work?
Well, I would get that a lot as feedback, like, well, I'm an adult. Because a lot of the people that I've always managed have been older than me. So do you have that weird, conversation that has to happen?
Yeah.
But like, I'm an adult. Why can't you trust me to have my phone? Well, because it's just part of the policy. It looks uniform when everybody's doing something and you don't have somebody in the corner just tweeting away. But then the second common response was, well, what if I have an emergency? Okay. Yeah, I get it. That's what we have a call center for. That's why we have protocol. But, I mean, people would blow up just for the simple fact that you tell them you can't be on your phone all day.
And the only way to avoid the conflict would be to...
not have the conversation. Allow them to be on the phone.
And what if you were ruled by fear, like a lot of managers are,
Yeah.
and they say, I don't want people mad at me?
Oh, exactly.
Could you be an effective manager if you were ruled by fear?
No, not at all. If you're afraid of everything, then you're not going to get anything done.
If you decide, and you've looked at this whole coronavirus panic craziness, now knowing that the models are incorrect,
yep,
and now knowing that the number of reported cases is wrong, and you speak up against the corruption, how does that go?
Well, for me, it's gotten my Reddit taken down. They won't let me back into my Facebook account, which I hadn't even used in like 5 years. The only YouTube video I ever put up was immediately taken down, and I got a strike, which means if you get a strike on YouTube, like let's say you have the Thrive Time Show and you do it regularly, if you get one strike, you will then get certain like monetization taken away, and at 3, they'll completely blacklist your page and you can't have it anymore. So the guy who had no videos, I've only ever been a consumer of YouTube. I put one video up, and they said, hey, this is strike 1. 24 hours. That was it.
Really?
Yeah. So I've gotten censored on almost every platform, posting, just trying to use the Thrive account to get the word out. I've had so many of those blocked where they said, hey, you can't do this. This is hate speech.
You can buy a copy of Mein Kampf, Hitler's book today.
Yeah.
But my book, Fear Unmasked, that I worked on with Esther Federkevich, is now banned from Amazon as hate speech. It's banned. The book is banned. So if you want to get the book right now, folks, just go to thrivetimeshow.com/freedom, and you can download the book for free. I give it away to you for free.
Nice.
But it's banned. You can buy Hitler's book, Mein Kampf, today, but you can't buy my book.
That's insanity.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's banned. It's hate speech. Now, third, the checklist. When you try to get people, Jason, to follow the checklist, do you ever have any people push back on that?
Oh, yeah. People, for some reason, either hate or are afraid of structure. So when you hold them accountable and you're like, hey, Dr. Breck, it's 2 o'clock, so let's go ahead and do the 2 o'clock checklist. I'm going to take up front. Can you clean the bathroom? Well, is that my job description? I always hear. Now, Breck would never say that, but that's
other people.
Other people would always say, well, do you pay me to do that? Was I hired to do that?
But again, if you take a stand against the bad hire, you take a stand against corruption, you take a stand for following the checklist, you could have a fear of the reaction of other people.
Right.
Okay, we continue. Following the herd about anything, about everything. Jason, if you don't follow the herd about something, let's just say that all the employees come to you and say, we don't feel like we should go to work because it's not safe.
Right.
And you show them the models. Yesterday, I showed the models to some of the employees, the elephant in the room. I had them read the article about the models being wrong. And I said, come hug me, and I'll say I told you so. And I got 2 out of 3 of them to do it.
Nice.
Because they know that it's wrong. They know that the herd was wrong.
Right.
But when you bring it up, man, how is that met when you bring up that now that we know the models are wrong and we know that the number of cases are wrong, and you even bring up that idea, what happens to most people?
Well, if you are following a herd that is on its way swiftly off a cliff, and you're that one cow or steer, whatever, or buffalo, I guess, other herd animals, that decides to go the other way, you're going to get a few like passing glances like, what's this weirdo doing? And typically people aren't going to pay you much attention. But the fact, or the second you start putting something out there that's in opposition of what the herd thinks or how they act, then you're not just the black sheep, you're a problem. You are different, and people don't like when things are different. That's one of the things that always made me super upset and started my exit from my liberal views is everybody wanted hope and change. But then the second you start changing things, like, oh, no. We wanted everything the same. We don't want this type of change. We want everything exactly the same. We want it black and white.
We want hope. We want drastic change.
Right.
We don't know what the change is. We have a hope it's going to be good.
Yep.
And now that we're getting it, we don't want it.
Yeah.
Hope and change.
This is new. I don't like it.
We had a hope for some great change.
Yeah.
And now that we're getting the change that's limiting our freedoms, we don't want that change.
Right.
And we have a hope we can go back to what we had. Interesting. Now, point 5, again, holding people accountable in any aspect of life. Why is that so scary for people?
People are, it comes down to fear. And it also comes down to people's personal relationships or how they're perceived. Most people think, especially, if you're new to management, even if you've been managing for a long time and you move to a new team, human beings so desperately crave the attention and approval of other human beings. And they know that simply asking somebody to do something that is in their job description, part of a checklist, or offering something that's going to help better them, if they are in opposition of it, that's going to create some sort of negativity. And then their approval rating, much like the president or any other elected official, starts to go down. And people don't want to lose that approval rating.
Okay. So what I want to do now is I want to, as we wrap up today's show, I want to give Dr. Breck the opportunity to share your final thoughts on fear.
Yeah.
And being ruled by fear. I want Nathan to be able to share about this because, again, fear is the mind killer. Elon Musk tweeted, fear is the mind killer. I agree. Once you're afraid, it's hard to think logically. We've got to move past the fear and go to another gear called faith. We got to walk with full faith, full belief. We've got to be confident. We cannot be fearful. We must be filled with faith that the things will get better. We must go back to work. We must get this going. We must get the economy restarted. We must do this. Dr. Breck, what is your take on fear?
Yeah, 2 things. One, on accountability. I believe it was Pastor Craig Rochelle that said, accountability is like putting the bumpers up on bowling. And so it just enhances your opportunity for success. You cannot get a gutter ball when you've got the little bumpers up that the kids use on the bowling alley. And so you intentionally place that in your life, you are going to thereby have better success, better opportunity for success because you don't have the ball go in. And the only reason as adults that we don't use it is the pressure of others, but if we use the bumpers, even as adults, we are going, if we're not professional bowlers, we're going to have more opportunity for success. And so we shouldn't fear accountability. We should relish it. We should welcome it. We should intentionally, proactively go out and put it in place to help us meet our goals and to reach the places we want to reach, the destination. So that's on accountability. On fear, I think there's 2 aspects of that. And one, I wish I could remember the author, but I read a book several years ago that talked about fear. And what he was talking about was his dad asked him to go into a new chicken coop that they had and feed the chickens. And he was afraid of the rooster because it would get in his face and flap its wings and point its claws at him. And he was very afraid of the rooster. And so he didn't want to go in, but his dad made him go in there to feed the chickens. And so he comes back into the house to approach his dad. And his dad's like, you got to go back out and face the rooster. And he didn't want to. And so he says that it wasn't until he feared his dad more than he feared the rooster that he got inside the chicken coop and actually faced down the rooster because dad was scarier with the belt. And so I think fear is on both sides of that. It depends on what you're fearing and how you utilize that. So fear can be something that immobilizes you and it paralyzes you, but it can also be something that motivates you. So, I mean, it's all in the response and it's all in how it gets utilized. And so, fear is both good and bad. Fear is what you fear out ahead of you versus what you fear behind you. And so when your fear to motivate you is greater than the fear to stagnation or following the herd, in this particular situation, we've got to overcome that fear with the greater fear of losing our liberty, of losing our constitutional rights, of our economy never starting back up.
Yep.
I mean, there's so many other things that we should be much more afraid of than the coronavirus at this point. Initially, we thought that it was, we heard the bark of a massive pit bull, and then we find out that it's actually a teacup chihuahua.
Right.
And yet we didn't change our action. We're still running away from that pit bull, and we're not facing down the teacup chihuahua.
So let me make sure everybody understands practical steps for dealing with fear. 1, get all the facts.
Absolutely.
Step 2, act after you've gathered the facts. Let me repeat. Step 1, gather the facts. Step 2, then act. Don't do the other way. Don't act the other way. Don't act when you're scared and then gather the facts. Okay, so next time something bad happens, your advertisement isn't working, your employee's not doing a good job, your sales are off, bad things are happening, gather the facts and then act. Nathan, what's your final hot take on dealing with fear and fear being a mind killer?
Well, I want to follow up on what Dr. Breck is saying. I heard it said that we don't change until the pain of staying the same outweighs the pain of the change. And a lot of times that's what we're afraid of. And if you go to Proverbs 22:12 and 13, they encapsulate this idea in the Bible here. It says, "The Lord's eyes keep watch over knowledge, but he frustrates the words of the faithless. The sluggard says, 'There's a lion outside, I'll be slain in the street.'" A lot of times that's what we do in our lives. We're sitting there in our homes afraid to ever go out. I call it the dog bite phenomenon. I had this happen to me about a decade ago. I went to a customer's house, and as I walk up to the door, the dog walks out. Just a beautiful German Shepherd, big old white German Shepherd. I haven't seen one of those before. They called him Casper. And he walks up to me, and as he walks by me, bam, just bites into my hand. I mean, right through my thumbnail, just blood going everywhere.
Shaka
and I'm
baba.
like, whew, okay. I had yet to be bitten hard by a dog before.
Shunda.
And so, but I'm a logical man. I thought, hey, I'll just be fine. You know what? It took me 2 years of petting dogs because I'm in houses with dogs all the time. I had to say, okay, logically, I know every dog has not bitten me. And I had to go out there and just pet the next dog. It's the old adage, get back on the horse when you get knocked off.
Right.
But I guarantee you, it's not going to be easy. And a lot of us, this transition, what the pastor's doing, that's not going to be easy. But we have to push through the pain to keep things. Right now, we're pushing through the pain to keep things the same. So know that will wear off. I pet dogs every day now. But that first 6 months, my hand shook every time I tried to touch a dog because internally there was fear. I had to override that fear. And us as business owners, we got to do that.
Homeboys and homegirls, listen, Georgia's been open now for 30 days, and people aren't dying in droves, okay? Georgia did it. We can do it. South Dakota.
The whole time.
Oklahoma's doing it. All the cool kids are doing it. We're opening up, folks. We're opening up from coast to coast. And now we got to be afraid of our governors. I encourage you to peaceably assemble. Everybody out there today, if you're in California, do it.
Yes.
And here's the deal. Embrace the fact you're going to get arrested. Get arrested. Do it again. Do it again. I'm serious because the Department of Justice will then have to rule in your favor.
Mm-hmm.
You better do that now because Lord knows the Democrats are in charge. Next time you get arrested, they will not rule in your favor. True. So you have to act now. Force the issue. Jason, do you have any final thoughts on dealing with fear? 'Cause somebody out there says, I like this Jason Beasley guy. I like this guy. I like the fact that he is speaking logically. And I'm telling you, I meet people all the time, people who are not white, who say to me, this conference was good. This was a good conference. But as a black man, if I go home and try to say this kind of stuff to my employees or to my wife or to my team, it doesn't work. What would you say to somebody out there of color listening who says, you know what, I kind of like the idea of limited government and acting based upon facts? What would you say to them? What kind of encouragement would you have for them?
Well, the first thing I have to say is thank you, whoever that one person is out there who likes me. I appreciate that. Nathan. But what I would say is you can't continue living somebody else's truth. So part of the reason why most people are afraid is, like Breck said, they didn't have another model, like going back to the rooster and the father thing. They're afraid of this one thing. Because that is what is like myopic to them. They're focused on that. That's their big demon. But there's so many other things out there. And if somebody told that kid, hey, this rooster's crazy, they're now going to believe what that person said, having not ever handled it before, and that's only going to be their truth. So for me, one of the things I had to deal with for the longest time was I would just regurgitate what other people said. And so anytime fear set in, it was because everybody's afraid of the unknown. That's one of the biggest fears that people have. But you can't. You're never going to know everything. So if you live your entire life afraid of the unknown, you might as well never leave your house or your apartment or get out of the car because you never know what's going to happen. So you have to just embrace things. Like you said, find facts before you act. You can't just blindly act on something because then what you're doing is you're acting on an influence, and you're never going to learn anything that way.
I think it'd be a great idea. If anybody out there who wants to remain quarantined, I think we should allow you to do it without subsidies. Yeah. And eventually when you fear starving, you'll come out.
Exactly.
Make the pain of staying the same more than the pain of change.
Mm-hmm. That's the move. That's the move. But we're going to end today's show with a boom here. I encourage everybody to walk forward filled with faith. This virus that came together to conspire to require you to stay in your homes has now been debunked. We know this. Pretty soon, little Dr. Fauci is going to be saying, ouchie, when the truth comes out that he has been encouraging a false panic. Neil Ferguson has been exposed as creating a false model. Dr. Deborah Birx has said the numbers from the CDC can't be trusted. It's all beginning to come out here, folks, but we've got to force the issue from coast to coast. Even if you don't believe in God, and you should, go to church somewhere. Peaceably assemble, peaceably gather, peaceably gather. Check out the website, Peaceably Gather. I encourage you to do this. Check it out, because even if you don't believe in religion or Christianity, go to peaceablygather.com, find a local church to go to, and show up in groups of thousands. There are over 8,000 churches showing up right now this morning. I could not be more excited. Find a place to peaceably gather. Nathan, you had a final hot take.
Yeah, and right now this is the greatest time to do this, because if you go back and look, most all of the lawsuits, most of the cases we're having go to where they're challenging their governments, they're winning. They are winning these cases.
You have to go now.
If you do it, you're going to win.
If you don't go now, you're going to watch our liberty be lost. I'm telling you, folks, you have to go now. Get to a place. We normally watch online. That's not the point. Show up, create a problem. Let's do it. 3, 2, 1, boom. With full faith and no fear, I encourage everybody to go to peaceablygather.com. That's peaceablygather.com. The good folks at Fox News have teamed up with my client, friend, and Pastor Brian Gibson. They've teamed up with Pastor Brian Gibson to share the good news about thousands of churches that are choosing to defy these unjust infringements on your First Amendment right to peaceably assemble. Thousands of churches from all over the country are opening up in Michigan, in California, in Florida. Some of the states that are locked down, like California and Michigan and Kentucky, churches are opening. Churches are opening in Buffalo, New York. Churches are opening in Manhattan. Folks, the time to sit back and just watch your freedoms be stripped from you it's not now. This is not the time to be passive. This is the time to be aggressive. Go to peaceablygather.com and listen to what Fox News has to say about peaceablygather.com.
She found this. She found this. Discover what many people are finding. With Ajovy, ask your doctor about Ajovy.
One pastor calls for action in the fight for the right to worship.
It's time for every pastor, every rabbi, every Muslim leader, every religious leader to exercise their First Amendment rights. Come on, let the lion inside you begin to roar and take your people back into the houses of worship.
All right, his message comes as congregations across the country face gathering restrictions, even as other businesses begin to reopen. So here to discuss his position to peaceably gather this Sunday
is his church pastor, Brian Gibson. Pastor, thanks for joining us. What is your message for this weekend? What is your message to governors in the states where you have churches, and what are you doing this weekend?
Well, my message to the governors, not only in our states, but all across America, is that church is essential and that we have a First Amendment right to peaceably gather. As a matter of fact, we're calling pastors to peaceablygather.com to join with us, to stand up for our religious liberties. And we're really just saying and asking this question. We were all willing to go online. We were all willing to, be good neighbors, be caring and compassionate whenever this outbreak first started. But as it wasn't 5%, 4%, 1% less, we saw other businesses open up around the country, and we saw the church be restricted and being called non-essential, while we're one of the entities that has the first mention in the First Amendment. So our message to everyone is, pastors, get your church church is going, religious leaders, let's step up and roar. And why could the Starbucks be open, the McDonald's be open? I had an event that was shut down by the health department at my church, but everybody else is open and the church has to close. Why is that reasonable? Why is it logical?
Makes sense. Here's a number of states, 11 of them, suing to reopen, suing their own states, including yours of Kentucky. There's the map right there. Your guidelines there in Kentucky for this Sunday, as you open up, you're trying to do it responsibly. You want to reduce occupancy to match the local guidelines, practice social distancing by spacing families 6 feet apart, dismiss attendees aisle by aisle so they don't get too close in the rush out. All staff wearing masks and gloves, increasing sanitation efforts. And you're saying that if Walmart can be open and I can do this responsibly, there's no reason why you shouldn't be allowed to do this, right?
Yes, we want to be responsible. We want to be caring. We want to follow all the same guidelines. But when Walmart has hundreds of people in it, Kroger has tons of people in it. When did 1 hour on Sunday morning become the deadliest hour in America? That all functions 7 days a week. We're talking about 1 hour a week, and we're talking about our First Amendment rights.
So let's take a look at Kentucky's in-service church guidelines that are set to start May 20th, just a few days after you want to do this. Services should limit attendance to 33% capacity, ensure staff and congregants wear face coverings, avoid congregational or choir singing, and consider taking temperatures, providing hand sanitizer, things like that. I guess the question is, it's a difference of a few days here. Why do you feel, like this is something that you need to do and you're calling on others to do on Sunday?
Well, we launched on that day because it was before the governor allowed us. We felt like they'd already severely overstepped their bounds and had come against our constitutional liberties. So we said, we're going to go before it because I'm not going to call guys to put their life or to put their neck on the line. You know what I mean? Through publicity, if I'm not willing to stand with them. So I said, I'll open my church up then. I'd already distributed communion on the parking lot when they told me I couldn't safely, sanitary. Because I think somebody has to stand up and act now. Every day that the church isn't open, a bit of liberty dies. So I'm encouraging every pastor, come with us. Let's open the church. Our people need us, and people need that communion and that connectivity.
Yeah. All right. Well, good luck to you, sir. Thank you so much for your time and telling us your story, Pastor.
Check out peaceablygather.com. That's peaceablygather.com, and tell your pastors about it. We must push our pastors to open their houses of worship. It is your First Amendment right to do so. You must exercise those rights or you will lose those rights. It comes down to either use it or lose it, folks. Now is not the time to be passive. Now is the time to be aggressive.